There's a common notion that human beings are, selfish in the sense of they want the best for themselves. You want to maximize your pleasure, minimize your pain.
Yeah.
So utilitarianism. But in psychoanalysis, there is this insight that actually we're really bad utilitarians, that sometimes we can really want the worst for ourselves.
Sure.
Gambling is a good example. People think that gamblers are addicted to winning. But to be honest, most gamblers are addicted to losing. And what happens is, I don't know if you ever played poker or anything, but if you lose some hands, what happens is you go on tilt. And on tilt means you start betting more frantically. And part of the psychology of this is when you're losing, it makes the win seem even more incredible. Right. So if a gambler playing slot machines always won, it would be boring, right? You might win some money, but it would be ultimately really boring. But the fact that you lose a lot generates a fantasy that, oh my goodness, if only I could win, then all of my problems would be solved. Wow. And so we weirdly get into this thing where we're addicted to the loss. It's the loss that generates the excessive attachment to some fantasy.
Because it makes the win that much better
that
for
much
us.
better.
Man, that's an awesome perspective.
If you were winning all the time, though, all of a sudden you're going to get bored and more bored, and then you're going to get pissed off at some point because, like, you never run into someone who you really respect and appreciate, where you really look up to them and you say, well, what's your secret? And they say, well, I'm just really great at winning. I win all the time. Yeah. I mean, you see crazy people do that. When Charlie Sheen was having his famous meltdown, like the hashtag winning, like you realize, like, that's not winning. That is the facade of winning around a sort of crumbling interior.
Yeah, we live in a weird frame in which in our society the losers lose doubly, but even the winners lose. So I mean, it's funny if you take an example of a prosperity church, for example, and people sometimes ask, why do people go to prosperity churches?
Like a Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen,
the one person you follow on
That's
Twitter.
That's true. It is. He is the one person I follow. I find it fascinating.
Actually, I wrote down. Peter, why should I follow Joel Osteen on Twitter? But I have too many questions to ask you, so we'll skip that one.
Yeah, somebody actually created a Joel Rollins Twitter briefly, where it mashed together Joel Osteen quotes and quotes from me. It was very funny.
Well, the weird thing is, like, I heard in the most charitable sort of attribution towards someone like a Joel Osteen, and then we'll get back to the. I don't mean to cut you off here, no. But. The most
I'm out of here. I'm gone.
the most charitable saying is that the Joel Osteen is sort of reparenting some people who maybe didn't have that sort of. He didn't have exposure to those basic aphorisms when they were growing up, and I know I didn't. But it was possible for me to, Ryan and I grew up in probably nothing as troubling as the Troubles in Northern Ireland, where you're from.
The secret is in the name, yes. The Troubles, right?
But we had our own troubles. We grew up in Dayton, Ohio. It's the overdose capital of America. A lot of drug and alcohol abuse in our childhoods, and I know a lot of that sort of wisdom would have been helpful to us at the time, and so in a way, like, it's almost as if he's like reparenting, and there's a sort of infantilization that's going on in the congregations there. But maybe some of those aphorisms are helpful, but also at the same time, I think that the infantilizing only goes so far to where it's well, you want to put your head through a wall.
Yeah, and the question is, to what extent does one, and I'm talking about Osteen here, but does one keep people in that, or to what extent does someone move somebody through that? And I think it's very important to meet people where they're at, but not keep them where they're at.
Yes.
But the interesting thing about the prosperity church in general is, of course, there's lots of statistics to show it doesn't work, right? So people go, well, why do people go to a prosperity church if it doesn't work? And the answer is, what we think the answer is if I show you it doesn't work, you'll go, oh my goodness, you're right. Look, people don't get wealthier in the church than in the wider community. It doesn't seem to have the effect. And so then once you're presented with the information, you'll go, all right, I'm going to leave. But that doesn't happen, right? So the question, of course, is why does that not happen? And from a psychoanalytic perspective, it's actually because the very failure is what keeps you in the church. So basically, you continue to get this fantasy that if you got the money, then you could get rid of all of your problems. You could escape all of your suffering. So you've got this incredible fantasy, right? If you got the money, you would be confronted with the reality that it doesn't work, right? So the very fact that it doesn't work keeps you going back so that you can continue to have this fantasy that continues to drive you. So if actually a prosperity church worked, the prosperity church would shut down, because you would get the $1 million and you'd go, oh, this gets me a nicer shower. Oh, this gets me a nicer mattress for my bed, right? But it doesn't fix the existential angst.
That is amazing. Well, I mean, it just makes me think.